My name is Claire Dawson. I'm 34 years old. I live in Asheville, North Carolina. On the surface, I am a nurse. People think nurses are tough, and maybe that's true. We stand in cold hospital corridors at 3 in the morning, cradling strangers' wounds, whispering comfort when families can't. We wash blood from our hands without flinching. We hold hearts together with nothing more than tape, faith, and exhausted determination. I've done that for years. I've been the strong one, but strength doesn't always follow you home. Not when home isn't safe. That night, the night everything changed, it was to a time when silence becomes unbearable. When the darkness isn't comforting, it's heavy. It presses against your chest like a weight you can't shove off. I remember standing barefoot in the kitchen. The tiles were cold against my skin. I had a glass of water in my hand, though I wasn't drinking. My fingers were trembling so hard the water rippled inside the glass like a storm was coming. I kept staring at the clock. That cheap wall clock. The one with the faded numbers and the crack in the glass. Tick, tick, tick. It mocked me. Each second felt like a countdown because I knew he was awake. Mark, my husband, he wasn't just my husband. He was also Emily's stepfather. My little girl, 9 years old. Too quiet, too careful. She had learned silence long before she should have. And Mark, he had a way of poisoning the air. You could feel him enter a room before he even spoke. You could smell him, the whiskey, the sweat, the bitterness that clung to his skin. That night, I could feel him moving down the hall. I could hear his heavy footsteps, uneven, angry. Something inside me locked up. You know that feeling when your body knows danger before your brain can catch up? That's what it was. My chest tightened. My throat closed. My body whispered, "Run," but I didn't, because Emily was in her room. When he slammed the bedroom door open, the sound cracked through the house like lightning. The walls shook. The picture frames rattled. My daughter stirred. I heard her bedsheets rustle, but she didn't make a sound. She knew better. I stood there, halfway between the kitchen and her bedroom, frozen but rooted like a shield. He saw me. His face twisted into something I can't even call human anymore. His jaw clenched, his eyes bloodshot, his fists already curling like he had to hurt something, anything, just to feel alive. "Claire," he hissed. My name sounded like venom, dripping from his teeth. I wanted to say something, to calm him, to stop the storm before it started, but my mouth was dry. My voice failed me. All I could do was stand there. He came closer, his steps heavy, deliberate. The floorboards groaned under his weight. "You think you're better than me?" he slurred, his voice thick with whiskey. "You think you can protect her from me?" He pointed toward Emily's door. My daughter, my heart, my reason for breathing. Something in me snapped, because in that moment, I realized he wasn't just angry at me. He was going to hurt her, and I wouldn't let that happen. I don't remember thinking. I don't remember planning. My body just moved. I shoved him back, harder than I thought I could. My hands pressed against his chest, the smell of whiskey burning into my skin. He stumbled, surprised. His eyes widened like he couldn't believe I had dared. "You," he started, his voice low and dangerous, but I didn't let him finish. I grabbed the nearest thing I could reach, the glass of water still in my hand, and hurled it. The glass shattered against the wall beside him, water spraying across his face. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't enough to hurt him, but it was enough to make him stop, to make him pause, and in that pause, I found something I didn't know I had left: fight. We struggled. Clumsy, desperate, he grabbed my wrist, twisted it until I cried out. I kicked, I clawed, I bit. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't strong. It was survival, pure and raw. At one point, he shoved me so hard I crashed into the kitchen counter. My back seared with pain. I saw stars. I thought I would crumble, but then I heard a small sound from behind the bedroom door. Emily's muffled whimper, and that was enough. I pushed myself up, blood in my mouth, rage in my veins. Not her, I spat, my voice shaking but louder than I'd ever heard it. You don't touch her, he froze. Maybe it was the way I said it. Maybe it was the first time he realized I wasn't going to bend anymore, and in that single moment of hesitation, I shoved him back again. Harder, he stumbled. His head hit the doorframe. He cursed, clutching his temple, but he didn't come closer, not this time. I was shaking. My body felt electric, buzzing with fear and adrenaline. My breaths came fast and shallow, and then silence. We just stood there, glaring at each other. Him, with his eyes full of rage and disbelief. Me, with my body trembling but my stance unbroken. Finally, he spat on the floor. You'll regret this. His voice was low, seething. Then he staggered back toward the bedroom, slammed the door, and just like that, the fight was over. I slid to the floor. My legs gave out beneath me. My hands were bleeding from the glass. My lip was split. My chest felt like it might burst from the pounding inside it. But I wasn't crying. Not this time. Instead, I sat there in the dim kitchen light, blood on my hands, bruises already forming, whispering to myself, "You fought back. You fought back." It was the first time in years I had felt something like power, and it terrified me. I crept into Emily's room after, quiet, careful. She was sitting on her bed, wide-eyed, her little hands clutching her stuffed rabbit so tightly the seams looked like they might tear. "Mom," she whispered, her voice small. I forced a smile through my swollen lip. "It's okay, baby. Go back to sleep." But she didn't. She curled into me, tucked herself against my bruised ribs, and I held her until the sun started to rise. Her tiny heartbeat against mine kept me alive. That night, something shifted. I had always survived Mark by staying quiet, by keeping the peace, by folding myself smaller and smaller, until maybe he wouldn't see me anymore. But at 2 a.m., I realized the truth. Silence doesn't protect you. It just feeds the monster, and monsters don't stop until you make them stop. Oh no, this story doesn't start with strength. It doesn't start with triumph. It starts with me, sitting on a cold kitchen floor, shaking, bleeding, whispering to myself in the dark like a prayer. This ends now, and if you're listening to this, if you've ever swallowed your pain because you thought it was safer, I need you to hear me. I'm not telling you this to make you afraid. I'm telling you because there's power in truth. And the truth is that night at 2 a.m. wasn't just a fight. It was the beginning of my revenge. To understand why I stayed that long, to understand why it took me years to finally fight back, you have to know where it started. Because monsters like Mark, they don't show you their claws right away. No, they come to you with smiles, with warmth, with promises. And I was the perfect target. Back then, I was 26. A single mother. Emily was just 2 years old. She was my world, but I was drowning. I worked night shifts at the hospital. Long hours. My body was always tired. My eyes heavy, my spirit frayed. I'd come home smelling like antiseptic and sweat. collapse onto the couch, and still wake up 3 hours later to feed her, change her, hold her when she cried. I loved her, but I was so tired. And then there was Mark. I met him at a grocery store of all places. It sounds kitsch, doesn't it? Like some cheap romance novel. But I swear, that's how it happened. I was standing in the cereal aisle, my hair a mess, my uniform still wrinkled from the night before, trying to pick between the store brand and the name brand because money was always tight, and he came up behind me with that smile, that charming smile, life's too short for store brand, he teased, reaching past me for the bright yellow box. I laughed, a real laugh. I hadn't done that in months. He was funny, easy, confident in a way that felt safe. He looked at me like I was more than a tired nurse with spit up on her shirt. He looked at me like I was a woman again, and God, I wanted to feel like a woman again. We started dating, slowly at first. He'd bring me coffee at the hospital. He'd fix the leaky faucet in my tiny apartment without me even asking. He'd play peekaboo with Emily, and she would giggle, her little curls bouncing around her face. I thought, maybe this is it. Maybe this is the man who will stay, because Emily's father? He left before she could even say his name. I was terrified she'd grow up never knowing what a father was supposed to be. Mark filled that void so easily. Too easily. 6 months in, he proposed. I remember the night like a photograph burned into my brain. He took me to the overlook above. The city, the one where you can see all of Asheville glowing like stars scattered across the mountains. He dropped to one knee, a velvet box in his hand, his eyes shining in the dark. Claire, he whispered, let me take care of you. Let me take care of both of you. And I said yes. Of course, I said yes, because I was young, lonely, desperate for stability, desperate for love. Because I believed him, because I wanted to believe him. The wedding was small, a courthouse ceremony. Emily wore a little white dress with lace, and she twirled in it like a tiny ballerina. I remember thinking, this is the beginning of everything good. I thought I had finally built a family, but beginnings are deceiving. Beginnings are lies. At first, it was perfect. He cooked dinners. He left notes in my lunch bag. He held Emily like she was his own. I let myself exhale. For the first time in years, I wasn't drowning. But then, little by little, the mask slipped. It started with comments. Are you really going out in that? You look like you're trying too hard, or maybe you should cut back on work. A good mother doesn't leave her kid with babysitters so much. I brushed it off, thought maybe he was just protective. Then it was the money. He didn't like me handling it. Said he'd take care of the bills, said I shouldn't stress, and I let him, because wasn't that what marriage was? Trust? Partnership? But soon, I didn't know what we had in the bank, didn't know what was being paid, what wasn't. He did. He controlled it all, and then came the anger. Not at first. At first, it was just irritability, snapping when the house wasn't clean, rolling his eyes when Emily spilled her juice. But then the first shove, I still remember it, we were arguing about nothing, literally nothing. Something about me forgetting to buy his favorite beer. He grabbed my arm, shoved me against the counter. Not hard enough to bruise, not hard enough to leave evidence, but hard enough to freeze me, hard enough to make me realize I had stepped into something dangerous. He apologized after. God, he cried. Claire, I'm so sorry. I'd never hurt you. You make me crazy. Because I love you so much, and I forgave him. Of course, I forgave him. Because the alternative meant admitting I had made a mistake, and I wasn't ready to admit that. That's the thing about men like Mark. They don't destroy you all at once. They do it piece by piece, cut by cut, until you're bleeding out. And don't even notice. One day, you wake up and realize you don't recognize yourself anymore. I wasn't Claire, the nurse. I wasn't Claire, the mother. I was just Mark's wife, Mark's property, and Emily. She learned early. She learned that when Mark's voice rose, she needed to disappear. She learned to eat quickly, quietly. She learned that laughter in the house was dangerous. It drew his attention. One night, she came to me after he'd stormed out, her little voice shaking. "Mommy," she whispered, "is it my fault when he yells?" I swear to God, something inside me cracked open then. But I still wasn't brave enough to leave, because where would we go? How would I support her? I told myself it wasn't that bad. I told myself he loved us. I told myself it would change, but lies have a way of rotting you from the inside. Years passed. Bruises faded. Apologies blurred into each other. I stopped wearing dresses with short sleeves. I stopped inviting friends over. I stopped believing in escape until that night at 2 a.m., when I realized silence wasn't survival anymore. It was surrender, and I wasn't going to surrender. Not with Emily watching. So if you've been wondering why I didn't leave sooner, why women like me stay so long, this is the truth. It's not stupidity. It's not weakness. It's hope. Twisted, poisonous hope that maybe the man you fell in love with still exists underneath the monster. But that night, I finally saw the monster clearly, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Her voice cracks here, then steadies. That's my backstory. That's how I became the woman bleeding on a kitchen floor at 2 a.m., whispering, "This ends now." But knowing my backstory isn't enough. You have to know what came next, because after you realize you're living with a monster, the question becomes, how do you kill it? I always thought the betrayal was his fists. The bruises, the shoves against walls, the slamming doors, the broken glass, but bruises fade. Glass can be swept away. The real betrayal, the kind that poisons your blood and seeps into your bones, that takes years to discover, and when I did, it broke me more than any punch ever could. It started with money. I should have seen it sooner, but survival makes you blind. You stop questioning things, because questions invite rage. Mark handled all the bills, all the accounts, all the credit cards. "Don't worry about it, Claire," he'd say, his voice sharp with irritation if I even asked. "You've got enough on your plate. I'll handle the grown-up stuff." And I believed him, because I wanted to believe my husband wasn't the kind of man who'd stab me with a smile. The first crack appeared one afternoon in the mail. He'd forgotten to check it that day, and I got there first, a letter from the bank, a final notice. I remember holding it in my hand, my stomach sinking as I read the words. Delinquent, overdue, default. But I thought, no, this has to be a mistake, because Mark made good money at the dealership. He always bragged about it. We lived comfortably, too comfortably, sometimes new TVs, fancy dinners, weekends away. Where was the money going? That night, I asked him, carefully, "Mark, I got a notice in the mail about the mortgage. Is everything okay?" He barely looked up from his plate. "Handled," he muttered, "just like that." Dismiss me with one word, but I pushed. God help me. I pushed. Handled how? "Mark, are we behind on payments?" His fork clattered against the table. His jaw tightened. Claire, he said, low, dangerous. Do you not trust me to take care of you? My mouth went dry. My pulse raced, because that wasn't a question. That was a warning. So I swallowed my fear, forced a smile, and whispered, of course I do, but inside, a seed of doubt had been planted. Weeks later, I found the second crack. It wasn't money this time. It was perfume, not mine, a faint trace on his shirt collar when he came home late one night, mumbling about closing a big sale. I asked gently, always gently, long night? Yeah, his eyes never met mine. Clients wanted to celebrate. You know how it is, but I wasn't stupid. Nurses no sense. We carry them home every day. Bleach, blood, latex, sickness. And this scent, this was expensive. Sweet. Foreign. It wasn't mine. That's when I started looking. Quietly, carefully, I checked his phone while he showered. Locked. Always locked. I checked his jacket pockets. Receipts for dinners I never went to. Bars I'd never heard of. And then the hotel charge. One night in Charlotte. 268.47. Business trip, he'd said. But I knew. God, I knew. The betrayal was no longer a question. It was fact. But facts don't always set you free, because I couldn't leave. Not yet. Emily was 7 now. Old enough to understand fear. Old enough to ask me, Mommy, why do you look so sad all the time? I wanted to grab her and run. But where? How? He'd cut me off from everything. My paycheck went into the joint account he controlled. I had no savings, no backup. He made sure of that, and so I stayed, not because I didn't see the betrayal, but because betrayal had cornered me. The final crack, the one that split me open, came from someone unexpected. His mother. We hadn't spoken much over the years. She always treated me like a temporary guest in her son's life. But one afternoon, she called out of the blue. Claire, she said, her voice tight, you need to know something. I braced myself. What is it? Silence. Then, Mark has another child. My grip tightened on the phone. What with? With a woman he met years ago. The girl's almost 5 now. I only found out recently. I thought you should know. I couldn't breathe. Another child. Another family. Another life. He was living in the shadows. And suddenly all the missing money, the perfume, the hotel charges, they weren't cracks anymore. They were a canyon. I was married to a man who had built 2 worlds, and I was just one of them. That night, when he came home, I looked at him differently. I saw the lies clinging to his skin. I saw the rage waiting under his smile. I saw the betrayal not as a series of accidents, but as a choice. He had chosen this. Chosen to break me. Chosen to humiliate me. Chosen to gamble with my life, with Emily's safety, with our future. And for the first time, I didn't just feel fear. I felt hate. Raw, sharp, consuming. But hate alone doesn't save you. It eats you alive unless you learn to sharpen it into something useful. I couldn't leave yet. Not until I had a plan. So I pretended. I smiled when he lied. I cooked his favorite meals. I played the dutiful wife. All the while I collected pieces, bank statements hidden in drawers, receipts tucked into books, whispers from co-workers who'd seen him with clients. I built a case in silence, because if he was going to destroy me, I would make sure I destroyed him first. And here's the thing about betrayal: once it shows itself, it multiplies. You start seeing it everywhere. In the way he flinches when you ask questions. In the way he guards his phone like a lifeline. In the way his eyes lingered too long on women passing by, I realized betrayal wasn't the exception with Mark. It was the rule, the foundation our marriage was built on, and there's no repairing a foundation made of rot. By the time I pieced it all together, something inside me had shifted. I wasn't just a wife anymore. I wasn't just a mother. I was a woman with a secret fire burning in her chest, and while he thought I was broken, I was building something, a quiet collapse, a dangerous patience, a resolve he would never see coming. They say silence can heal, that if you sit still long enough, the noise of the world fades and you find peace, but silence doesn't heal when it's forced. Silence rots you from the inside out, and for 2 years, that's exactly what it did to me. After discovering his other child, I didn't scream. I didn't throw things or pack my bags or demand the truth. No, I folded myself smaller, tucked my rage into the corners of my ribcage, smiled when he asked questions, nodded when he lied. I became the perfect ghost wife because I knew the only way out was careful, precise. If I revealed too much too soon, I'd lose everything. I still went to work every morning at the hospital. The fluorescent lights, the endless beeping, the smell of antiseptic. That place became my escape. Funny, isn't it, that I found freedom in a place filled with pain? But there, at least, I wasn't Mark's wife. I was Nurse Claire, competent, trusted, someone whose voice mattered. And then the shift would end, and I'd drive home, hands trembling on the steering wheel, bracing myself for the performance. Mark was unpredictable in those years. Sometimes he was generous, dropping gifts on the counter like offerings, a new bracelet, a leather purse. Sometimes he was cruel, slamming his fist on the table because the chicken was too dry, and sometimes he was nothing at all, a hollow man staring at his phone, smiling at messages I wasn't allowed to see. The whiplash was worse than the bruises, because how do you brace yourself against chaos? Emily saw more than I wanted her to. One night, she crept into my room, her hair tangled from sleep, her voice small. "Mommy, do you and Daddy not like each other?" I froze. My throat closed up. How do you answer that when your child's world depends on the lie? So I said the only thing I could. "Daddy and I are just tired, sweetheart. Go back to sleep." But after she left, I sat on the floor in the dark and cried silently into my hands, because children always know. They can smell fear. They can taste tension in the air. And Emily was learning what it meant to live in silence too. My collapse wasn't dramatic. No big scene. No single breaking point. It was small things, forgetting to eat, forgetting what day it was, forgetting how to laugh. The mirror became my enemy. I'd catch glimpses of myself, sunken eyes, pale skin, lips pressed tight, and think, who is she? When did I lose her? The Claire who danced barefoot in the kitchen, gone. The Claire who dreamed of traveling to Paris, buried. The Claire who once believed in love, dead. All that was left was a shadow. Mark liked me better that way, docile, predictable, so quiet he could almost forget I existed, but he didn't know that silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. While he was busy building his double life, I was building my own secret world. I bought a small notebook, one of those cheap spiral ones you can hide in a purse. I wrote everything down: dates, times, charges, receipts, the names of women whispered by coworkers who didn't realize I was listening. I became meticulous, precise. Every lie he told became ink. Every bruise I hid became proof, and the notebook grew heavier in my hands, like it was collecting not just evidence but pieces of my soul. I also started learning. Late at night, when he snored beside me, I'd sit in the dark with my phone, screen dimmed to the lowest light. I read about financial abuse, emotional abuse, narcissistic cycles. I found forums of women like me who had clawed their way out. Some stories ended in freedom, some in tragedy, but all of them gave me something I hadn't had in years, a sense that I wasn't insane, that my collapse wasn't weakness, it was survival. Of course, Mark noticed the distance. One evening, he leaned back in his chair, studying me like a hawk studies prey. "You've been quiet lately," he said, almost amused. I kept my voice even. "Just tired," he smirked. "Good. You look better when you're not running your mouth." And I smiled. Because what he didn't understand was this: quiet isn't always empty. Sometimes it's loaded. Sometimes it's the sound right before a storm breaks, but silence costs something to. It eats at your friendships. I stopped going out with coworkers, stopped answering calls from my sister, stopped visiting my parents on Sundays, because every interaction became a performance, a chance for the mask to slip, and I couldn't risk anyone seeing the truth. So I isolated myself, slowly, deliberately, until it was just me, Emily, and him, a house full of secrets, a family built on silence. The collapse reached its lowest point one winter evening. Emily had gone to bed. Mark was out late with clients. I sat on the bathroom floor with the shower running, hot water steaming, the mirrors in my hands, a bottle of pills, not because I wanted to die, but because I couldn't see another way to live. I twisted the cap, tears burning my eyes, and then a sound, Emily's voice, calling from her room. "Mommy?" I had a bad dream. My hands froze, the pills rolled across the tile, and just like that, I knew I couldn't collapse forever. I couldn't leave her alone with him. If I went down, she'd go down with me. And that was a betrayal I refused to commit. That night, I made myself a promise. No more ghost wife. No more silent shadow. I would wait. I would plan. I would sharpen my silence into a weapon. And when the time came, I wouldn't just leave. I would make sure Mark never had the power to destroy us again. And so I collapsed, quietly, not because I was weak, but because collapse is what you do before you rise. And when I rose, he wouldn't recognize me anymore. People think rebuilding starts with action, with big decisions, bold choices, but it doesn't. It starts with the smallest flicker, that moment you whisper to yourself, "Not anymore." That night in the bathroom, with the pills rolling across the tile, that whisper was born in me, and once it was there, it refused to die. The first thing I rebuilt was myself, not all at once, not in any visible way. It started with food. I forced myself to eat again, real meals, not just coffee and crackers between shifts, eggs in the morning, soup at lunch, a salad at night. It sounds ridiculous, but after years of starving in silence, feeding myself felt like defiance, because the starved body can't fight, but a nourished one, that's a weapon. Next, I rebuilt my mind. I downloaded podcasts on psychology, on manipulation, on financial independence. I listened with earbuds tucked under my hair as I cleaned, cooked, smiled for Mark. Every new piece of knowledge was like a brick. And brick by brick, I was building a fortress inside my skull that he could never touch. But rebuilding isn't just about learning. It's about finding allies, and for that, I had to be careful. I couldn't tell my parents they adored Mark, believed he was the perfect son-in-law. I couldn't tell coworkers it could get back to him. So I started small. Anonymous forums, late-night chats with women who'd survived men like him. They became my invisible army. Women across the country, across the world, whispering strength into my ear at 2 a.m. while Mark slept beside me. One of them, a woman named Anab from Colorado, typed something that changed me forever. She wrote, "They want you quiet. They want you small. Every step you take to grow, no matter how secret, is an act of war." And I remember staring at that line, my chest rising and falling, thinking, then let war begin. Mark noticed changes. "Of course, you've been cooking more," he said one night, squinting at me across the dinner table. I shrugged. "Trying new recipes," he nodded, suspicious but uninterested. What he didn't know was that every grocery trip I slipped an extra 20 into a hidden envelope tucked under a loose floorboard in Emily's room, my war chest. Dollar by dollar, meal by meal, freedom was growing. Emily, sweet Emily, became my silent partner without even knowing it. We started a ritual. Every night before bed, we whispered one secret dream to each other. "I want a puppy," she'd say. "I want to see Paris," I'd whisper back. "I want to be a dancer. I want to be free." She didn't understand what my dream meant. Not yet. But she smiled anyway, as if she did. Those whispers stitched us together. And every time I said the word free, it stopped being just a dream. It became a plan. The turning point came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Mark had gone out with clients. Again, I was cleaning the living room when his laptop pinged. For years, I never touched his things. But that day, something in me shifted. I sat down, opened the screen, and there it was: emails, bank statements, messages from women with hearts in their signatures, proof. My hands trembled, but my face stayed calm. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply plugged in a flash drive I'd bought weeks earlier and started copying folder after folder, screenshot after screenshot, every dirty secret, every betrayal sliding quietly into my pocket. When the drive was full, I tucked it into my bra and went back to folding laundry, heart pounding like a drum. By the time he came home, drunk and smug, I had smiled, kissed his cheek, and tucked away the evidence that would one day destroy him. But evidence alone wasn't enough. I needed strategy, and so, late one night, I called a hotline. The kind you only find when you're desperate enough to type "domestic abuse help" into a search bar. The woman on the other end had a calm voice. She listened as I whispered, careful not to wake him. When I finished, she said gently, "You're not crazy, Claire. You're in danger, but you're not alone." She gave me resources, contacts, advice, and for the first time in years, I felt a hand reaching into the dark. The rebuild wasn't glamorous. It was nights of hiding documents under Emily's stuffed animals, days of memorizing account numbers, weeks of smiling at Mark while planning his undoing. It was exhausting, terrifying, but it was movement, and movement, even slow, is still freedom. One evening, Emily and I were watching a movie while Mark was out. She turned to me suddenly, her eyes serious. "Mommy, are we ever going to leave here?" I froze. My throat burned. "Why do you ask, sweetheart?" She shrugged, too wise for her age. "Because you look like you don't like it here." Terror stung my eyes. I brushed her hair back and whispered, "One day, baby. One day soon." She smiled, leaned her head on my shoulder, and in that moment, I knew the rebuild wasn't just for me. It was for her. Mark still thought I was crumbling, and I let him think that. I let him believe the silence had swallowed me whole, but inside, brick by brick, I was rising. And when I finally stood tall again, he would have no idea how high I'd built myself. Rebuilding isn't loud, it's quiet, invisible, like roots spreading under the ground. And when those roots are strong enough, the tree will rise whether he likes it or not. You ever watch a man who thinks he's untouchable? The way he walks into a room like it belongs to him, the way people nod, laugh, flatter him, the way his lies sound like truth even when they're poison. That was Mark, a king in his own little kingdom, but every king forgets the higher the throne, the farther the fall, and I was ready to make him fall. It started small, a whisper here, a seed there, because if you want to destroy someone like Mark, you don't rip off the mask all at once. You let it slip slowly, carefully until the world starts asking questions on its own. The first crack appeared at Emily's school. Mark loved playing the perfect father in public, showing up to school events, shaking hands, handing out smiles like candy. But he hated the little things: homework, parent-teacher meetings, bedtime stories. One afternoon, I met privately with Emily's teacher, Mrs. Hanlon. She smiled politely, asked how things were at home, and something inside me whispered, "Now." I lowered my voice. "I worry about Emily. She asks why her father's never really here." Mrs. Hanlon frowned. "Oh, but he's at every event." "Yes," I said softly, holding her gaze. "At the events." Pause, but never with her. Her expression shifted, just slightly, the seed planted. The second crack came at one of Mark's client dinners. We sat at a long table, crystal glasses catching candlelight. Mark told his usual stories: how successful he was, how devoted his family was. People laughed, clapped his shoulder, raised toasts, and then someone asked me, "Claire, what's your secret? How do you to keep such a strong marriage?" I smiled, the way I'd practiced in the mirror, and I said softly, "We survive by pretending." The table went quiet for a moment, confused. Then Mark barked out a laugh, turning it into a joke. But I watched the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, and more importantly, so did his clients. After that, I started leaving breadcrumbs. An offhand comment to a neighbor about long nights alone, a subtle flinch when Mark touched my shoulder in public, a quick glance away when someone complimented our marriage, tiny cracks in the perfect painting. And once people start seeing cracks, they can't unsee them. But I wasn't just whispering, I was preparing proof. That flash drive, the one tucked away like a heartbeat under Emily's floorboard, was now filling with more and more bank statements, hidden accounts, messages from women who thought they were the only one, and every piece of it had a time and place to surface. The first public blow came during Thanksgiving dinner at his parents' house. Mark's family adored him. To them, he was golden, their successful son, their perfect provider. But that night, while passing mashed potatoes, I let my hand tremble. I set down my fork, voice just loud enough to carry. "It's funny," I said with a small smile. "Mark spends more money on his business dinners than he does on groceries for his family." The room froze. His mother frowned. His father cleared his throat. Mark laughed too loudly. "Claire's joking." But no one laughed with him, and in that silence, The illusion cracked just a little more. The second blow came at church. Mark loved the image of being the devoted family man in the pew, hand on my back, smile polished. But one Sunday, as the pastor spoke about honesty and marriage, I let a single tear roll down my cheek, not dramatic, not loud, just visible enough for the woman beside me to notice. She squeezed my hand, and when she whispered, "Are you all right, dear?" I whispered back, "Not really." Mark didn't hear, but the church ladies did, and gossip spreads faster than sermons. The third blow was unplanned. It was at Emily's dance recital. She was on stage, twirling in her little blue tutu. Parents clapped, filmed, cheered. Mark's phone buzzed, and like always, he couldn't resist. While his daughter spun under the spotlight, he texted another woman. I leaned over, whispered low but sharp, "Your daughter's on stage. Maybe try looking at her instead of your mistress." He froze, eyes wide, face draining of color, and though my voice was low, the parents behind us shifted uncomfortably. They heard, and once people hear something like that, they don't forget. Mark was furious that night. As soon as we were home, he shoved me against the wall, hissed into my face, "What the hell was that, Claire?" I stared back at him, my voice steady. The truth, his grip tightened. "You want to embarrass me?" "No," I whispered. "I want you to reveal yourself." For a moment, he didn't move, didn't breathe, then he let go, stormed out the door, slammed it so hard the frame shook, and I smiled, because the more he tried to silence me, the more he revealed himself without even knowing it. By Christmas, the mask was crumbling. Neighbors whispered. His clients hesitated. His family avoided certain questions at dinner. And Mark was unraveling. Late nights turned into later nights. His temper flared quicker. He drank more, shouted more, slipped up more, and every time he slipped, I caught it, stored it, saved it, because exposure wasn't the endgame. It was only the beginning. The world was starting to see the cracks, but soon they'd see the whole monster. You can't rush exposure. You have to let the mask peel away until they rip it off themselves. And when the crowd finally sees what's underneath, there's no putting it back on. You don't just walk into war without preparing for the fire. I've been preparing for months. Every lie I caught, every slip of his temper, every receipt, every message, every whisper tucked away. It wasn't enough for me to know the truth. The world had to see it. He had to choke on it. And so the final act began. It started on New Year's Eve. Mark had thrown a party at our house, like he always did. Clients, friends, family. He wanted the night to be about his success, his empire, his shine. I wanted it to be his stage of ruin. The house glittered with lights. Champagne flowed. Music thumped. Mark was in his element, laughing too loudly, hugging too hard, smiling like a wolf in a tailored suit. And I wore red, not just a dress, a warning, red, like the blood he'd spilled from my spirit, red, like the fire I was about to set. At 11:45, I tapped my glass for silence. The room turned, eyes on me. Mark's grin froze, confused. Before midnight, I said softly, "I'd like to make a toast." Mark reached for my hand, tried to play it off, but I stepped forward, holding a small remote in my palm. With one click, the lights dimmed. The projector hummed alive, and the room filled with his sins. First, the texts projected on the wall. Mark's words to other women, cheap and hungry. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Faces twisted. Some looked away, then the bank statements, account after account, money siphoned, lies exposed. I heard his father mutter, "Oh my God." Then came the photos, him in hotel lobbies, him at bars, him where he swore he'd never been, and finally his voice, the recordings of him spitting venom at me, calling me worthless, threatening me, played loud enough for every neighbor, every client, every family member to hear. The room went silent. Only his voice echoed, ugly, violent, undeniable. Mark lunged for the remote, but I stepped back, voice steady. "Touch me," I said, "and they'll see what you really are." He froze, because he knew after all that evidence one shove would make him a monster in front of them all. The room erupted. Questions, shouts, accusations. "Is this true, Mark? You lied to us? You stole from us?" His clients stormed out. His family stared like he was a stranger, and Emily, sweet Emily, sat upstairs in her room, safe, because I told her the party wasn't for children. She wouldn't see this, not yet, but this wasn't just about public shame. This was the kill shot, because what no one in that room knew was that everything they saw had already been sent, emails scheduled, files delivered, lawyers waiting. By the time the clock struck midnight, his empire was already collapsing from the inside. Fraud, infidelity, abuse. The world had it all. Mark tried to speak, to explain, to spin, but every word he said was swallowed by the weight of truth echoing around him, and when the clock struck 12, the fireworks outside began. Explosions of light and color in the night sky, while inside, his world burned. He turned to me then, eyes wild, breath ragged. "You'll regret this," he hissed. I leaned close so only he could hear. "No, Mark, you'll regret underestimating me." The night ended in chaos. Guests fleeing, his phone buzzing nonstop, whispers chasing him through the house he thought was his kingdom, and me, I stood at the window, watching fireworks paint the sky, feeling the quietest calm I'd known in years, because it was done. The confrontation wasn't fists or screams. It was truth, sharp as glass, cutting him open for all to see, and there was no bandage big enough to cover that wound. But here's the thing. Confrontation doesn't end with a single night. It echoes. It spreads. The next morning, his face was everywhere. Local news, social feeds, headlines. Businessman exposed in scandal. Wife reveals hidden abuse. Clients withdrew. Family disowned. His so-called friends disappeared. And Mark, the man who thought he was untouchable, was suddenly very, very alone. And me? I was free, not just from him, but from the silence, from the cage he'd built around me. The confrontation wasn't just about ruining him. It was about reclaiming myself, and as I packed his things into boxes, set them by the curb, I realized he'd never understand what I'd truly taken back, because the one thing abusers never think you'll find is your own voice. You want to know what revenge really feels like. It doesn't feel like fire. It feels like silence, the silence of no longer being afraid, the silence of watching them fall without lifting a hand, the silence of knowing they'll never own you again. Do you know what the strangest thing about revenge is? It isn't loud. It isn't messy. It isn't even sweet. It's quiet. So quiet it almost feels wrong, like walking through a house after a storm has ripped the roof off. You see the wreckage, you feel the cold air, but what echoes most is silence. That's how it felt after Mark's fall. The weeks that followed were almost surreal. Every morning, the headlines bled his name. Every news anchor said the words I'd whispered to myself for years. Abuser, liar, fraud, he fought it. At first, hired lawyers, tried to sue me for defamation, but evidence doesn't bend to charm. Proof doesn't care about charisma. The more he struggled, the deeper he sank. His empire went bankrupt. His face, once printed on glossy magazine covers, was reduced to grainy mugshots and courthouse sketches. The man who once towered over me looked so small on those screens, and yet, pause, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't dance. I didn't laugh. I just breathed, because survival isn't about winning. It's about remembering you're still here. Emily noticed it first. One morning, she padded into the kitchen in her pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes. She climbed into her chair, poured cereal, and looked at me. "You smile more now, Mommy," she said simply. I froze. Not because she was wrong, but because I hadn't realized it. After years of carrying fear like a second skin, I hadn't noticed the corners of my lips soften, the way my shoulders sat lower, the way my laugh didn't sound foreign anymore. It wasn't revenge that gave me that. It was freedom. But here's the part no one likes to talk about. Revenge doesn't erase scars. It doesn't rewind time. It doesn't make the nights less lonely. It just makes the silence bearable. There were mornings I woke up sweating, hearing his voice in my head. Nights I stared at the ceiling, wondering if I had become something like him, a destroyer, a manipulator, someone who pulled strings in the dark. Was I better? Or had I simply learned his game? The answer came slowly, painfully. I was better because I chose truth. Because I didn't lie to win. I didn't break vows. I didn't steal souls. I just showed the world what he had always been. And sometimes, that's enough. People ask me now, would I do it again? The late nights collecting evidence. The constant fear of being caught. The years of silence, followed by one explosive storm. Yes, 1,000 times yes, because when you're drowning, you don't think about whether the lifeboat is pretty. You just grab it. And this revenge was my lifeboat. Mark didn't disappear. He still exists, somewhere in the same city. I see his shadow sometimes in court updates or whispered gossip. He's a ghost now. A man people avoid at restaurants. A man whose name makes people wince. And me? I walk freely. I hold Emily's hand without fear. I hear my own voice when I speak. That's the difference between us. The night I left the courthouse, after the final ruling against him, the air smelled of rain. I remember standing on the courthouse steps, people buzzing around me, reporters, strangers, flashes of cameras. But in my head, there was only one sound, the quiet thud of my heart, steady for the first time in years. I wasn't a victim anymore. I wasn't even just a survivor. I was a woman who took back her story, and here, in this dark room, speaking these words to you. That's the final piece, because secrets rot in silence. And I refuse to rot anymore. So let me leave you with this. If you're listening, if you're sitting in the dark the way I did for years, thinking no one sees you, I see you. You don't need fire. You don't need fists. You don't even need forgiveness. You just need the courage to reclaim your voice. And when you do, the world shifts. It may not hand you justice wrapped in gold, but it will hand you freedom, and that, my friend, is worth everything. My name is Claire Whitmore. I was 38 when I chose to stop being silent. I was a wife, a mother, a ghost in my own house, and now I am simply free.